Hello, my name is Tom Kiekefer, and I work with this group called Save the Whales. And today we are going to be talking about sea turtles, the amazing lives of sea turtles. And one of the reasons being, if we can save the sea turtles' habitats, do you think it will benefit the whales? Yes, and it comes back and benefits us. So this is usually an hour-long program. We go into the schools, but since things have changed a little bit now, hopefully we'll be visiting you at schools soon. But I'm trying a little online program here, but it's going to be broken up into 7 lessons. So we have 7 lessons plans for this program. And so it's going to be kind of fun, but it's really breaking it down. And this way we can even look more in depth about what turtles are, what reptiles are. We're going to be discussing this, how they migrate and things like that. So I think I'm going to start here. And we're going to go to a PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to get this PowerPoint going. Okay, so this program is about the amazing lives of sea turtles. And right in this picture, these are hatchlings. And we're going to learn why they call them hatchlings, which I'm sure all of you know, but very different than us mammals. So things like that we'll discuss. So the first lesson plan, lesson number 1, we're going to talk about the origin of sea turtles. We're going to talk about reptiles and what makes a reptile versus a mammal. And then we're going to be talking about the 7 different species of sea turtles. You're going to meet them and we're going to be discussing them. Okay, so I think I better keep moving here. First of all, before we jump into turtles, let's go back into time before the Earth was even formed. They called it the Big Bang Theory, and that's not the series that we see on TV, but this is actually a theory of how the Earth was starting to be formed with gases and everything kind of collapsing on our Earth. That was 13.7 billion years ago. Then the Earth actually formed 4.5 billion years ago. And boy, I have a hard time understanding a billion years, much less a million years. And then we finally had the ocean forming about 1 billion years later. And so 3.8 billion years ago. And once we have water and earth, we started seeing life. And life occurred about 1.5 billion years ago. And they call it eukaryotic. And basically organisms that they call eukaryotic are basically single-celled and multi-celled critters, but very simple. We started getting more advanced creatures like during the Triassic period, the dinosaur period. That started about in the millions now, 250 million years ago, which is still a long time ago. And then you're all familiar with Jurassic Park and Jurassic period. That was the era of the reptiles. And that was about 205 million years ago. Our turtles came about during that period, but about 100 million years ago, they've been around. And they found a fossil that was dated 65 million years ago. And this is what we consider a big turtle, a big dinosaur like they used to be, but now they're kind of cousins, and our turtles today that we have are cousins of the dinosaurs, but we're going to they've gotten a little bit smaller, but still we have a big leatherback sea turtle that can get almost, largest one was 10 feet, and typically they can get up to 7 feet long and weigh up to 2,000 pounds. And so they get really big. So humans, we have only been around 0.05 million years on Earth. And that is equivalent to 50,000 years. And we're going to be learning about some of the things we as humans are doing to the environment that's really harmful, our impacts. In a very short period of time, we have done some damage. And so we'll talk about that, and we'll hopefully talk about how we can break some of our bad past habits. So sea turtles, they've been around for over 100 million years, but in just 100 years, they are struggling to survive due to human activities. And 100 million years ago, they haven't lived that long, but they've held on to the same adaptations, or what we call features, like feeding adaptations, feeding features for catching slippery jellies and things like that. So they have held on to those traits, those features. And then I would say in less than under 100 years, and I would say in the last 50 years, pollution and things that we're seeing getting in the ocean that shouldn't be there are happening more and more. And in fact, when I was your age, everything was in glass bottles. We had milkmen deliver us milk. We had a little milk chute, and they would drop off milk in gallon jugs, and it would be in glass bottles. Our Coca-Cola, Pepsi, our sodas were all in glass bottles. And then what was interesting is that we did have some aluminum back when I was 50 years ago. I'm a dinosaur as it is, but that aluminum came in some cans, soda cans, things like that. And then we also had aluminum trays for our TV dinners, but we did not have all this plastic. And we're going to be talking about plastic and pollution and marine debris in our oceans that are harming our turtles and hurting a lot of other marine life out there as well. And we'll discuss that more in other lessons. But it is scary for the turtles because a lot of them are very endangered. We'll be talking about that. And what I mean by endangered is the populations are very low in numbers. And we have to be worried because they're going to go extinct like the dinosaurs if we're not careful, and we need them on Earth. It's not only scary for the turtles, but us humans need them, because we're going to learn about how our turtles protect our ocean environment, protect coral reefs, protect sloughs and bays, things like that, and keep everything down. So reptiles. What are reptiles? Well, we've got a lot of different reptiles. There's over 7,500 different types of reptiles. And right here you can see an alligator, iguanas. Here's a freshwater turtle, red ear slider, it looks like, and a snake, tortoises, land tortoises, but there are over 7,500. So what are scientists doing? How can we organize and keep track of all these different species? What we do is they call it classification. They classify them into different ranking orders. They start with the kingdom, which is a big, all animals is included in that. Then the phylum, which is basically any animal with a backbone, or that's what they call chordata. And then we have a class of reptilia. Okay, so that's how it breaks down. And we have 7,500 different reptiles. So that's a lot of reptiles to keep. And that's how we do order here. So down to order, we've got the testudines, and there are 250 different species of turtles. But now if we break it down further, we can go into a suborder, Chelonia, and they're all about there are 7 different species of our sea turtles, only 7. And then the family, even in the family, we've got 2 different families, because we have the hard-shelled sea turtle family, Cheloniidae, and then we have the leatherback, which, like its name implies, it has a leathery skin, but we'll talk more about that. They call it the Dermatelidae. Okay, so basically, our turtles are distant ancestors or cousins to our dinosaurs, and they still exist today. There are 250 species of turtles, but out of those 250, 181 live in freshwater creeks and ponds. Some of you might have pet turtles at home. And we have over 62 land turtles, which we call tortoises. And then we only have the 7 different species of turtles. So let's meet the 7 different species of sea turtles. And as you can see, our leatherback should be in a family of its own because it's much bigger than these other 6 hard-shelled turtles. And yes, it does not have a hard shell, but there are floating little bones in this area here along its back, which we call the carapace. We'll learn more about anatomy in the next lesson. But they are huge, up to 7 feet long, and they can weigh up to a ton in weight, or 2,000 pounds. And they're adapted for feeding on jellies, and we're going to be going over adaptations in another lesson. Okay, the green sea turtle. They call them the green sea turtle, not because of the color of their shells. Sometimes their shells are brown in color, but because they eat grasses, and they basically are vegetarians, and they eat algae and grasses, and they actually take care of our bays by eating the grasses. That makes grass grow more, holding our sediment down, so there's no erosion in our bays. And we also have them eating algae in coral reefs, because algae can overgrow and smother our corals. And so they're very important to our oceans. The loggerhead, oh my gosh, they have a big log head, real heavy skull, and they have chomping jaws, powerful jaws. They just crush things with their powerful jaws. They can crush big conch shells. And so they take care of the shell population, so there's not an overpopulation of shells. Hawksbill, oh my gosh, they are so important to our coral reefs. They eat sponges. They specialize on feeding on sponges. And it's very fascinating that we're going to be talking about what sponges are made of, and it's pretty amazing. But one of the things that we have here is a flatback turtle. I forgot to mention him. We don't know enough information about the flatback, so they call it data deficient. All these other 6 turtles out of the 7 are endangered in some way or other. And this leatherback is actually critically endangered in our Pacific Ocean, our Western Pacific Ocean. Over in the Atlantic, they're vulnerable. They're doing a little bit better. But basically, there are different classifications of being endangered. If something is, they have least concern, then actually vulnerable, threatened, that's where our sea otters are right now, then they list them as endangered. And if they're really endangered and red listed, we're very worried about them, they'll call them critically endangered. And that's when the population is so small, we're worried about them going extinct. So these are the 2 modern turtles, and they are very fascinating. We're going to be talking a little bit more about their feeding adaptations and how they're different. They're smaller, for one thing. They're more modern turtle. And one of the things that's interesting is they share all the different adaptations with these other species. Like one of them's got a crushing jaw, like the olive ridley. And then also they have similar adaptations to the leatherback. And we'll discuss more of that. Okay, so those are the turtles. Okie doke. So all of these turtles, because they are reptiles, they can't generate their own body temperature, so they rely on their outside temperature. So all the hard-shelled turtles are restricted to Hawaii, to pretty much tropical areas, 0 latitude, where our big leatherback, because it's so big, it can migrate all the way across the ocean. We'll talk about migrations in another lesson. And they can actually almost go up to Alaska or Oregon. And then in fall, when they fall back an hour in time, our seasonal changes in light, they recognize that and they go right back to their breeding grounds. Usually in spring, when we spring ahead an hour, they go to their feeding grounds. So basically, reptiles are cold-blooded. Mammals, wild mammals, we're warm-blooded. We can generate our own body temperature. The leatherback, maybe scientists are actually discussing, and there are articles written that we might have a reptile that is actually warm-blooded. And that's because the leatherback is so big, it can hold in heat better than our smaller turtles. The more mass you have to little surface area, you can retain your heat. Being big in the ocean is a good thing. In fact, whales, like blue whales. They're big, and all that blubber keeps them nice and warm, and they can at least generate their heat, and leatherbacks are holding in some of that heat without losing it. Okie doke. But also, one of the things that we're going to learn more about with the tortoises, I want to introduce you a tortoise, is that not only are they cold-blooded, you can see the scales that turtles have, where mammals have hair. And also, we're going to be talking about nesting behavior of females and laying eggs. These are all reptile traits where they actually lay eggs versus mammals give live birth to young and things like that. So let's go and meet Tort, or Tortellini. His nickname is Tort for short. And let's look at this. This is a friend of mine's turtle, and we will take a look at Tortellini. So let's go in another room and check out Tortellini. Now we're behind the scenes, and I wanted to talk to you about our tortoise. This is Tort, and he is a tortoise. He is cousins of the sea turtles. He's a reptile, and remember, there's over 7,500 different types of reptiles. We have lots of different tortoises, and he's right in that corner right there. He's a little bashful. I'm having a little difficulty with the screen, but I did want to show you, this is their habitat back here. You can see it's very dry, it's warm, because Tort could not live in freezing weather. And his tank setup, I just wanted to show you this. We have UV light that simulates sunlight, and that's very helpful for them because they need to get vitamin D and everything else. My friend is actually, she's the owner, and she takes them out during the daytime, and a lot of sun there so they can get good vitamin D. And then also there's a heat lamp right here. The black lamp is a heat lamp that's on all the time. And Tort, this is what he needs to survive. And this is why our hard-shelled turtles, we talked about 6 out of the 7 different species of hard-shelled turtles, they live in tropical areas. And tortoise has to live in an area that's nice and warm. And if we're in a tank setup like this, we have to assimilate his environment with what he's used to. What I want to show you is, let's take Tort out and start looking at some of these features. Okay, so here's Tort, and you can see these scales that they have. Ooh, he just hissed at me. I'm sorry, Tort. The scales that they have on their flippers, that's characteristic of a reptile. They're also have scales on their shell. We'll talk about the scales on their shell. And then also, Tort is a female. So females, turtles, lay eggs, very different than mammals that give live birth to young. And the scales are something, for humans, it's hair, but instead of hair on them, they actually grow the scales. And Tort's really active here. Let me see. So Tort also is cold-blooded. So they have to generate their, ooh, boy, I'm having a hard time here. So he's cold-blooded, which means he relies on an area that keeps him warm. Let's take a closer look at Tort with the other camera. Okay, here's Tort a little bit closer. And I just want to point out some features of Tort being a reptile. First of all, so we do see scales where humans or mammals would have hair instead of scales, but with reptiles, the scales replace the hair. And then you can see these are big scales we'll talk about with the turtles. They have a special name for those. And also, Tort is a female, so she does lay eggs instead of giving birth to live young like mammals. But we're going to, she's not going to like this, but we're going to have to get a male involved to do that. And right now, she doesn't have a male. Now, she's a digger. And one of the things is that we have to keep her in an environment that's warm for her. And what she'll do when she's outside, she'll dig, and at nighttime, when it gets very dark and cold in the deserts, what they end up doing is digging with those powerful arms and hands, and you can see the long nails that she has, and then on her hind flipper, which they don't have flippers like sea turtles, but their hind feet are used for walking. They don't have the adaptations for swimming like our sea turtles do. And one other thing you'll notice is that watch him pull all of his body into the shell. And I didn't mean to do that to you, Tort, but that is a characteristic of our freshwater turtles, but also tortoises, and that protects them from predators. Our sea turtles cannot pull all of their appendages in. They can't pull their head into the shell for protection, and their big flippers out here. The flippers, these are front arms and legs, but their hind fins, they can't pull in, so sometimes our sea turtles get torn off flippers, but it's really neat because I've seen turtles migrate with one flipper, and at least if they have their two back fins or flippers, they can use those as rudders, and they can compensate for no movement on that side. But, so Tort he's a digger, as he's already trying to dig, and what he'll end up doing is at nighttime, when it's cold, to stay warm, they dig themselves underneath the ground, and basically that keeps them warm. Plus, they'll drop their metabolic states, their respiration, also their heart rate will drop down, and they kind of conserve all that heat that they have from the day. And if it gets really cold, like in November, tortoises actually hibernate like bears. And usually in September, October, a lot of tortoises that are just outside, they would actually go into a dormant or a hibernation state where they just really slow down their whole system and everything else. Okay, you can see his eyes. His eyes are right there. Ooh, sorry, eyes are right there. And then they have little ears on either side, and the sea turtles also have ears, and they're sensitive to sounds in the ocean, and noise pollution is another form of pollution that's in our oceans from a lot of ships, and sometimes they get hit by ships because they have to come up and breathe air. Tort is breathing air, so they have lungs, and also you can see the nose is right up there, sorry little Tort, and he has little eyes, not big eyes like our sea turtles to gather a lot of light. And then also right underneath this, on top of the head, that little scale right there has got the little gland that I have to talk to you about. And I'll talk more about this in anatomy, but it's called the pineal gland. And we as humans have one right between our eyes, but we've lost use of it. They call it being vestigial in evolutionary time, because we have electricity and I have lights going on right now in the room, things like that, where turtles are really cued into nature, and they use that light source as a way of indicating when it's day and night. And sea turtles will learn actually use it to when we start falling in November, when we have to fall back an hour in time with our lighting, that actually gets our turtles to migrate back to their breeding grounds. And then usually in spring, when we spring ahead an hour, they'll migrate. So in his tank, that's why we need a light. And we always have the light on during the daytime and then off at night. And okay, and so that is what's so important about keeping a cold-blooded critter alive and happy in its environment. All right, so he's calming down a little bit, but you can get a good look at him now. Let me adjust this down a little bit. All right, and one thing is, he's very sensitive. His whole body, he can feel my hand on his shell. And he definitely can feel it on his arms here. But isn't he cool? Boy, I love this little guy. Or gal, I'm sorry. And so that is Tort. And I think we better give him a rest because I think he's about time. He wants to, let's see what he does on the table. Okay. So there's Tort. And he wants to get back into his terrarium where he sees food. And there he goes burrowing away. So I think that's about it with Tort. I don't know if he's going to be real happy with me, but good trooper. So that is discussing reptiles a little bit more in depth. And it's really fascinating. If you have pet turtles at home, and some of you do, I'm sure, they are truly amazing critters. And how they adapt to their environments is just incredible. Hope you enjoyed that. That was the first, but Tort was a great helper there, and hopefully he'll still be friends with me after we had to put him on the spotlight and film him. But the next program lesson, we'll be talking about sea turtle anatomy, swimming, and their senses. And yes, that is the nose of a sea turtle, and they have a good sense of smell, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit.